calling in stratagems while running and aiming, being able to see through fog a little bit better, destroying an entire factory strider convoy in 20 seconds all by yourself, and learning how to dominate a mega nest with ease. These are just some of the tips we'll be going over today. Helldivers 2 is a vastly deep game with various different mechanics, and today we'll focus on pretty much everything you need to become an elite Helldiver and handle even the hardest of difficulties. But I should note that the game has a lot more depth, and also today none of my tips will be support weapon specific tips. Those tips will come at a later time. So without any further ado, here are the top 105 tips and tricks I've picked up over the past year and a half. If you learned something from this video, all I ask is that you leave a little like, and if you don't learn anything, which I doubt, leave a dislike and write a lovely comment much like this one. So without any further ado, let's start off with a couple of basic tips that are crucial to your success and work our way to more advanced ones. First up, each body part on nearly every enemy in Helldivers 2 has different health pools. So if I shoot the Charger's left leg and switch to its right leg, it'll take far longer to kill than just focusing one leg. Fire scales with enemy size, dealing more damage to bigger enemies and less damage to smaller enemies. Considering their massive health pool though, it will still take a while for some of them to die, but keep in mind the famous expression: the bigger they are, the harder they burn. When going uphill, spam dive to be able to go up certain angles you otherwise wouldn't, as well as to be faster. The same applies for when you're slowed. Spam dive to cover more ground, as slow takes a long time to clear out. Prone also has a lot of benefits. Not only does it of course reduce recoil by a tremendous amount, but it puts out fire if you go prone, and you gain a whopping 90% explosion resistance when you are prone, which of course will save you hundreds of times and can be used strategically with 500 kilo bombs as well as hell bombs. Now let's go ahead and talk about a few extremely important game settings I'd recommend anyone have in their game. If your machine can handle it, turning volumetric fog and cloud quality up to its highest setting will make it easier to look through fog, which we come across a lot in Helldivers 2. Shout out to Odo and full credit for him for this tip. Also, turn off auto climb and set it to a specific key you can use every now and then. Personally, I have mine on left alt. It is kind of awkward to press, but it works pretty well. This will save your life more times than you might think. On a similar note, do separate climb and jump pack key bindings. By default, these are on the same key, but you really don't want that, or else you'll be warping or jump packing when you're really just trying to climb, which by the way, it says jump pack here, but it also applies to the war pack and the hover pack as well. You can also access the game's input config file by going into your Steam folder, user data, account number, going into the folder 553850, then remote, then opening up input settings.config as a notepad. But that's not the tip. In here, we can do a couple of things that the game won't allow us to do in the in-game settings. First off, we can set up weapon function open and weapon function right to a specific key, which in my case is T. What this will do is, for example, when we're using the halt shotgun, which has two firing modes, a stun and a damage option, we can swap back and forth with the press of a button like this and min-max our efficiency. On the same notepad, you can set it up in a way where you can call in stratagems, run, and aim all at the same time with a simple press of a button, which in my case is my side button on the mouse. Instead of explaining how to do it in this video, which takes a couple of minutes, I'll have the link to my unlisted YouTube video on this subject in the description below, so you can check out after this video. Now, if you're not feeling all this config talk and you just rather change stuff in game, then a classic way to do it is scroll down to the stratagem section and change up, down, left, and right to the arrow keys. This way, you can run and call stratagems. The only downside will be though, you'll have to remove your hand from your mouse, so you're not really going to be able to aim while doing all of this. As for the switching fire mode, you can just set it up to open weapon wheel to a key, for example T, and switch weapon wheel right to another button, such as say your side mouse button. And by doing this, you can be nearly as effective as the previous method. It will just take an extra button, but it's not really that big of a deal. Lastly, for settings, I recommend turning up FOV to the maximum and getting rid of the camera shake altogether. This will make your game feel less cinematic, but it will make you more efficient. And honestly, after a while, camera shake does get quite annoying, but if you like it, leave it on, it's up to you. And let's move on from these settings tips. As you're about to drop in a mission, you'll notice this icon sometimes. This means the mission you're going into will have a SEAF artillery side objective for you to complete. And if you see this other icon, this means hell bombs bombs can be called in this game, which means there are probably going to be specific side objectives. For example, in the case of, let's say, bots, this will often mean there are stratagem jammers or detector towers in this mission, or maybe even both. And since we're on the subject of before dropping in, pay attention to the type of biome you're dropping into. For example, dense forest maps or mega cities are awful biomes to bring orbital strikes and eagle stratagems, as they'll oftentimes get blocked by trees and buildings. So you'll want to use, for example, more turrets and mines on these maps. Biome aside, but still before dropping in, you'll want to pay attention to high ground. This can sometimes be seen from the briefing screen. Dropping into high ground early gives you early information of objectives such as shrieker nests, automaton factories, stratagem jammers, etc. While on the subject of high ground, enemies, of course most notably melee ones such as the terminids, they struggle with handling high ground. So if you find a big rock and you have a hover pack, for example, you can oftentimes pretty easily handle big groups on your own, as they'll really struggle to get to you. On the minimap, you can spot out most side objectives. Some are harder to see than others, but with time and effort, you'll learn what they look like on the minimap without even having to get close to them. And oftentimes, find most of the side objectives at a quick glance of the minimap. For example, this very distinct circular shapes here means there's a SEAF artillery here. Every time I open a map, I spot them out immediately. And honestly, I just recommend every time you spot out a side objective, just take a look at it on the minimap to see what it looked like, and it will register in your brain in no time and you'll get used to it. As for the detector tower side objective, you can destroy it with 500 kilobombs and even an orbital gas strike. But what's interesting is that you can hellbomb this side objective even from outside its perimeter, so use that to your advantage. As for fortresses, these challenging outposts can be, and oftentimes should be, easily dealt from a distance. Just snipe out the fabricators and call it a day. Just beware of the bunker turrets. You'll want to use quasar cannon, AT emplacement, or recoilless rifle, something along those lines. When playing against the automatons, I'd recommend bringing a thermite and an ultimatum combo. These two choices will offer you enough anti-tank solutions to literally not have to bring anything else to deal with armored enemies. I still do bring more just in case though. On automatons, the AT emplacement is simply the undisputed best stratagem in the game, and no one can change my mind. It can snipe out objectives from a distance, outposts, and trivialize factory striders, so prioritize unlocking this stratagem as soon as possible. A single AT emplacement can take out an entire factory strider convoy, which has 5 full factory striders. Just find high ground ideally, but at the very least just get a lot of distance between you and the convoy and just nuke the factory striders' faces and you will absolutely melt them. While still on the bots, I'd also have to say fighting the bots is pretty much optional. Sure, there are missions that you have to fight and hold your ground, but in general, the bots are very easy to get away from. So anytime you're overwhelmed, just do a tactical retreat and lose all aggro. Speaking of which, if you find yourself constantly overwhelmed by bots, use Scout armor set, yield more anti-tank choices, and also use rocket sentries, or that is Bobby. Retreat more and bots will become extremely easy to handle. If you're playing wave-based missions that require you to hold your ground and fight bots, utilize rocket sentries and maybe autocannon sentry with an AT emplacement, and you will single-handedly handle these entire bot waves. If you still find yourself having a hard time staying alive on bots, put on a medium or heavy explosion resistance armor set and pack a ballistic shield. This is the Juggernaut build and you will become an absolute tank using these. Now as for reinforcement calldowns or bug breaches, these happen once every couple of minutes. But on the bot front, if you can constantly shut down these little troopers right here, you can delay it from happening. On the Illuminate front, just shut down these watchers and you will prevent all reinforcements. But I would recommend allowing for strategic reinforcement call-ins. That is, allowing them to call in reinforcements if, for example, allowing them to call reinforcements on an objective as you're about to move onto another. What this will do is they will end up wasting their reinforcement cooldown, giving you a lot more space. As for stealth play, as it currently stands, stealth play can be done, but it's not ideal. What I find to be particularly overpowered is what I call the rat playstyle, which is a movement-based approach where you run around the map, constantly avoiding fights and nuking objectives and outposts with big stratagems from a distance. This is the easiest way to win in Helldivers 2 with barely even engaging in fights. I have quite a few videos on this, which is a good time to remind you that line of sight exists in this game. To lose an enemy, simply make them lose sight of you. Yeah, that's kind of obvious, but that's where smoke items become useful. If you can cut your line of sight from your enemy and then pivot to a different direction, they will lose you. The enemy will reposition towards your last known location, so just make sure you get out of there. On the subject of rats, one ratty thing you can do is learn enemies' pathing. I mean, you'll do this subconsciously anyways. For example, I've learned that bugs take the long route in this position right here when trying to get to me, which makes my life extremely easy when I spot out this type of rock. In other words, there are quite a few ways and quite a few positions you can force enemies to take the long routes, even the big ones such as Bile Titans, and this will make your life a lot easier once you kind of start picking up on the map, of course. This is more advanced though, and it will definitely take a ton of time. On cities though, there are tons of alleyways you can utilize to force bigger enemies to take a lap around the neighborhood, making your life a lot easier. Use these to create space. As a result, mega cities are a pretty hard counter for big enemies such as Bile Titans. You'll oftentimes not even need to bring as many anti-tank solutions, and you can just focus more on AoE clearing stratagems. Matter of fact, you could even avoid bringing support weapons to small and mega city missions as well, as certain POIs will always have specific weapons, such as, for example, this point of interest here always has this machine gun just sitting here. Cities will also have hundreds of scattered loot around the city, making resupplying a lot easier. Speaking of, the resupply stratagem oftentimes isn't enough for a full team. Learn your points of interest, as the supplies in them are 100% consistent. Speaking of resupplying, I'd recommend always bring an infinite ammo choice weapon with you when playing in big groups. That can be a laser cannon, the scythe, the double-edged sickle and regular sickle, the dagger, etc. These weapons can essentially have infinite ammo as long as you don't overheat and you're not going to be as ammo hungry. As for reloading though, it's worth noting most reloads have different reload stages. So for example, the recoilless rifle has 4 reload stages. So if you stop reloading, let's say after stage 2, which is when you remove the expended shell, when you attempt to reload again, it will pick up from that stage, making the reload a little bit shorter the second time around. So keep that in mind, as sometimes it's worth just doing a half reload. When you do finish reloading, however, this weapon icon will go from red to white, and at that point you can either start moving, diving, or just standing up, and you'll do a little reload cancel. If you let the animation just play itself out, you'll waste a couple of precious milliseconds. We can't afford that. As for round reload weapons, you can spam your reload button as you're shooting to keep ammo topped off as you're blasting away. Now let's go back onto the ship a little bit and talk about some weapons. I should point out that the recoil simulator when customizing a weapon isn't reliable, so use it as a reference, but don't fully trust it. And what about these weapon stats? They're good information to have, but in my opinion, the most important stat here for you to pay attention when building your weapons is ergonomics. Ergonomics is how quickly your weapon snaps to the center of the screen while turning. Low ergonomics feels like you're playing with terrible input lag. It's really bad. So to give you a number, try to get as close to 50 ergonomics as possible. That, in my opinion, is the sweet spot where the weapon feels really responsive. The game also has a ton of hidden statistics below the hood, such as stagger force, demolition force, durable damage, gravity factor, bullet velocity, and so much more. And honestly, I don't think it's worth paying attention to any of that. I'd recommend you just pay attention to weapons armor penetration value and its ergonomics. And the rest, just feel it out in your hand and make your own decision. If you do want more information on all this though, check out the Helldivers 2 Wiki, which I'll link down below. Now, since we brought up the Helldivers Wiki, I should also point out the Helldivers 2 Companion App, which you can find on Google or of course as an app on the App Store. No, this is not an ad. The point of this is if you're unsure which planet you should hop on next for the major order, just look this website up and it will pretty much tell you where to go. Okay, so which weapon should I level up first? The weapons that struggle the most from bad ergonomics or bad recoil or bad magazine size, as realistically those are the only things you can change. My top 4 weapons that I would level up first would be the Eruptor, the Knight SMG, the Liberator Carbine, and the Scythe. These are the ones that benefit the most from attachments in my opinion. So you've picked up your weapon and you want to level it up as fast as possible. How? If you're in a group, queue for bot eradicate missions, spam sentries, and AT emplacements, and kill the drops on site. You will be done in like 2-3 minutes. If you're solo, play blitz missions on bots and snipe out the fabricators from miles away with a quasar cannon or AT emplacement, and then suicide. These are also extremely fast. On the subject of farming, what about farming super credits? Put on the war pack, and if you don't have it, unlock it as soon as possible, and go into a level 1 or level 2 mission, play on a moon biome planet such as Clawrel, since the points of interest will be easier to see, and farm points of interest while watching a Takibo YouTube video on the side. This will yield several hundreds of super credits in average. Okay, I got the super credits now, Takibo. Which warbond should I unlock next? Realistically, yeah, there are warbonds that are more value packed than others, but honestly, I would just recommend going for what your loadouts are missing. Generally speaking though, Control Group Warbond, Chemical Agents, Servants of Freedom, and Democratic Detonation are packing with value. I will say though, Helldivers doesn't really have a clearly superior stratagem or weapon. It really comes down to what faction you're playing, what biome, what sub-faction, and what enemy types you're going up against. Even the AT emplacement, which I love very much so against the bots, can be really bad on forest biomes, for example. So the point is, test relentlessly and just find what you enjoy. But it must be said, certain stratagems will simply make the game feel easier. Shield Generator Pack, Guard Dog, Dog Breath, and Orbital Napalm Barrage are just some great examples of this. Now let's go back and talk a little bit about stratagems, especially some that don't get enough love. The Warp Pack can be used to clear 20 meters plus jumps. Just dive and double warp and you will cover a lot of ground. Orbital stratagems have a maximum radius of 50 meters after ship module upgrades, so just stay 50 meters away from them to play it safe. Turrets are an absurdly powerful tool. Not only do they deal massive amounts of damage, but they also get aggro, which can take a lot of pressure off of you. If using guard dogs, you can call them back to your backpack with pressing the button 5. I'm not exactly sure what it is for console, and that will prevent the guard dog from wasting precious ammo. As for a decently underrated pick, HMG Emplacement is a wildly powerful tool, especially on the Illuminate front. It can wipe out full-on entire waves with a single HMG, including harvesters, by the way. Pretty much everything except the Leviathans get melted by this one. Also, Tesla Towers can be the strongest turret in the entire game. It will need to be properly positioned though, and it is fairly dangerous. It can, however, live for a very long time and take out more enemies than any other stratagem in the game, as long, of course, as it stays alive long enough and doesn't get destroyed by, say, a charger or something like that. The Wasp Launcher, which is a very underrated support weapon, is arguably the best support weapon in the game against the Illuminate. It automatically locks onto targets, it one-shots overseers, locks onto stingrays and destroys it with a couple of shots, and it obliterates flesh mobs as well. And yes, it can also kill harvesters easily. Gas mines are another huge underrated pick. It's probably second to the Orbital Napalm Barrage in full-on reinforcement clearing potential. It can kill so many enemies. Orbital gas strikes are also very consistent at getting kills and getting enemies off of you, and it can destroy objectives. Flame sentries can be more impressive than people make of it. If you have a fire-based loadout, bring these in, as they have a 95% flame resistance and can stay in the fire for a very long time. Now, with that, let's talk loadouts and weapons. When building loadouts, have at the minimum always one swarm clearing choice, one anti-tank choice, and one medium bulk army killer. Specifically, when building versus automatons, build heavily towards more anti-tank choices as they're more armored. Usually I'll even bring up to like 3 or 4 choices. For example, here are 2 loadouts that I enjoy using. Over at the Illuminate, I tend to personally build a little bit more focus on swarm clearing choices and good options to deal with shields as well, and very few anti-tank choices. Once again, here are 2 examples. Lastly, for terminids, it's more dead in the middle, where you need a pretty decent amount of both anti-tank and swarm clearing potential. Here are, once again, 2 good examples. Which armor set should you bring at any given time? Armors that complement your loadout choices, such as Urban Legends for bad ammo efficiency weapons like the Scorcher, Peak Physique armor set for terrible ergonomic choices and melees, and Engineer if you're Thermite spamming. But if you want to play it safe, Scout armor set, as it's a really safe choice, but realistically it depends on the role you want to fill. As for booster, which one should you bring? Most boosters are honestly pretty terrible. The top two choices are going to be the Vitality Enhancement and Stamina, so just make sure your team has those. Now what about melee combat? Is it ever worth it? Realistically, meleeing is a roleplay choice, not an efficient one, but it can be somewhat effective at clearing smaller enemies, but yeah, overall it's not that good. You can of course quick melee enemies that are about to strike you, such as Hunters and Overseers, and stagger to get them off of you. Speaking of, if you find yourself constantly overwhelmed by bugs, use stagger heavy weapons such as the Blitzer. If you find yourself constantly overwhelmed by the Illuminate, use gas nades and plasma weapons such as the Scorcher. And as for the automatons, prioritize medium armor penetration weapon to better deal with the rocket striders and devastators, and bring tons of anti-tank choices. But gas is king in Helldivers too, especially against the Illuminate and bugs. The dot damage plus the confusion status effect is a wildly powerful combination. The more you play with it, the more you realize it's actually really overpowered. Thermites and ultimatums one-shot warp ships even with a shield on. Thermites are a little bit more inconsistent though. Explosive damage weapons such as crossbow, eruptor, scorcher, purifier all dominate overseers and flesh mobs. Speaking of, I guess it's a good time to move on to some enemies. AoE weapons and fire-based weapons are the flesh mobs' weaknesses. Fast-firing TTK weapons are ideal for destroying Illuminate shields. For example, the MP98 Knight is the most notable pick. If on the bug front and chargers are giving you a hard time, bring a thermite. One single thermite to the face will kill any charger. Impalers, when burrowed, will also die to one thermite. But that's not the tip. The tip is, the Impaler's weak spot is the exposed head here. More specifically, higher up in the head, around this area, is where it particularly dies a little bit faster. If you're worried about factory striders, just nuke their faces off with anything anti-tank. Alternatively, their belly is their weakest spot in the body, although it's gonna be way more dangerous. As for automaton reinforcements, if you destroy the dropship's engine, the crew will live. If you destroy them outright though, the entire crew will die. If you're having a hard time controlling bug breaches or even Illuminate reinforcements, use an orbital napalm barrage and you'll likely just need to anti-tank the armored survivors. Speaking of reinforcements, one fun fact, when you upload data on these escape pod missions here, it resets reinforcement cooldown. So be careful to not cause a back-to-back reinforcement cooldown by accidentally resetting it. If you're having a hard time with mega nests, bring an Emancipator exosuit. It absolutely melts impalers, biotitans, chargers, biospewers, just pretty much anything bug, and of course the mega nest itself. Speaking of which, mega nests always have several impalers sitting on it, about 4 or 5 or so, as well as a biotitan and a couple of chargers. I'd recommend picking them off first before pushing into the nest. But before you even pick them off, make sure you close what's called the Titan hole. These are these massive big holes right here. These can only be closed by explosive stratagems, drop pods, or ultimatums. Nades are not gonna cut it. Which reminds me, there are 3 types of bug holes. The Titan holes, which spawn biotitans and such. The medium bug holes, which spawn mostly alpha commanders, which look like this. And these small holes, which spawn hive guards, scavengers, etc. Do note though, the more holes you close and the more objectives you complete, the more you increase the patrol spawn rate, which will mean more enemies. The patrol spawn rate is at its highest when you are by the extraction after full clearing a map. At this point, the patrols are gonna spawn non-stop. Do note, there is a difference between patrols and static spawns or presets. Static spawns are always there. They're just sitting there on points of interest or objectives, just waiting to engage, such as the 4 to 5 impalers on the mega nests as an example. They never move and they only disappear if you kill them. The patrols though are the moving groups that are always sent towards you and your team and spawn every few seconds. These can be avoided and they will disappear eventually. Bile Titans, for example, can be spawned as a patrol, but the tip actually is, when you're fighting the bugs and you've got the Bile Titans in the mix, use them to your advantage. Bile Titan Spit can wipe out complete group of bugs with friendly fire damage. If I don't have enough swarm clearing choices, I always use these to my advantage. I would also recommend always bring in at least one type of explosive based weapon when going up against the bugs in case you drop into a Bile Spewer planet. Explosive damage is their weakness, and there's nothing worse than dropping into these planets only wielding light armor penetration weapons with no answer to dealing with them. It honestly feels like a wasted game. Speaking of wasted, when your teammates have died, don't just automatically reinforce. I know your heart is in the right place, but kindly find out who is nearest to the player's body and let them reinforce the dead player instead, so the player can go and retrieve his loot. As to die a little bit less, I'd recommend learning how to pre-stim. Pre-stim is an essential skill set in Helldivers 2 to minimize your death count. As you play Helldivers a ton, you start to get a feel of when you're about to get your shit rocked. So you can do a quick pre-stim to prepare yourself and spare yourself of a death. Speaking of dying, a sub-faction which you'll die a lot to is the Predator Strain, the hardest sub-faction in the game. I should mention that these Predators cannot be outrun, no matter if you're using jump packs or warp packs. So pack a ton of damage because you're going to have to be killing these on sight. Do not try to use movement to try to outrun them. It's not going to work. You'll also die a lot to the game's worst designed enemy, the Leviathans. And to deal with these, honestly, just avoid them. They've been designed literally for you to avoid them, not kill them. It's been said by the developers. Unless your team is completely built for shooting them out of the sky, your best bet is just by using buildings and rocks to your advantage. If you're solo, you will not be killing them consistently, which I guess is a good time for a few solo related tips. If you want to improve in Helldivers 2, I'd recommend playing solo from time to time. Not much, just sometimes. This will force you to handle every enemy in the game by your own self without anyone to help you out. So if you want to get better at the game, try this out. If you are trying to play solo, you'll have to get ready to be a jack of all trades, master of none. You'll need everything in your loadout, from anti-tank solutions, swarm clearing solutions, and medium-sized enemies as well. Feel free to watch a couple of my videos for loadout ideas. Wink wink. Here's also a few quick tips to make solo feel a little bit easier. Let the timer run out in the game and Pelican 1 will arrive on its own without requiring you to sit in the inside of the extraction radius. Alternatively, if you do call it early, step out of the extraction radius when it's about to land to make it hover and kill everything on sight. And the most important tip I can give you is to make solo feel dramatically easier is learning how to reset fights. In other words, tactical retreating. If you use movement well enough and run away from the current fight and reposition yourself on the map, it will cause full-on reinforcements to essentially just disappear. Ultimately though, Helldivers 2 skill is purely game knowledge and decision making. Mechanical skill isn't really that relevant in the game. It's all about knowing what to use and when to use it. When to take on an objective and when to retreat, you know, things like that. It's purely a decision-making skill set, and there's nothing like just playing the game to attain that knowledge. And as for the last tip in this video, and the most important one, if you've been selected to be the Hellbomb Backpack wielder, die with honor. Don't you dare drop that backpack. Thank you all for watching the video. If you've learned something, please leave a like and consider subscribing. I'll be catching you guys on the next one. Peace!